go.
All right, welcome back to the Smart and Snark podcast, where real software engineers and real software managers discuss real software. On this podcast, I have my esteemed employee, Mr. Matt Jaffe. Jaffe is a world-renowned computer scientist and astrophysicist. His role here is to try and educate us all in the value of technology and ultimately why we should submit to its authority. I am myopic middle manager Jason Allison, whose role is to look good in front of upper management. This is
you know what's funny is I hired the guy that hired you. Just
is there a point in there?
Putting that out there. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is season 1, episode 4. Hiring is a thing. So you could think of this as our manager's minute. I wanted to get a little on the serious side today. Lately, I've been seeing on LinkedIn a number of complaints regarding companies' interview process, especially the initial interview. The gripes I read about range from hiring managers talking too much to talking too little. I hear comments or questions having too much abstract theory, or even make or break questions, which you have to guess the correct answer or be passed over. So, for today's podcast, I'd like to share my interview style. I'm actually kind of proud of it in all seriousness. I've been tuning it for about over a decade. The desired outcome here is to help others who would like to grow in their interviewing techniques. My style is based on the age-old question of how do you build great teams? And my answer is in the interview process. So for hiring, I target employees with 2 specific traits. Jeff, you probably have none of these. 1, a good teammate who can navigate adversity. And 2, an individual with aptitude and a desire to grow. Yes?
So you said you've been tuning this for about over a decade. Is that the kind of precision we can expect from this whole process?
Exactly the type of precision you can expect from my process.
Fantastic.
About exactly, yes. So, when you try to find the right employee, if I hire a great Go developer, all I'll ever have is a great Go developer. If I hire someone who can learn any language, I'll have someone who can learn whatever language I need them to learn. And managing through adversity is also important. When things are easy, guess what, Mr. Jaffe? Things are easy. When things are tough, that's when you really learn about somebody, and that's when you're going to kind of be in the trenches and understand how things are. So to show all that off, what I think I'd like to do today is put Mr. Jaffe on the hot seat. I'd like to interview you for a senior software engineer role at FeatureBase. How does that work for you, Mr. Jaffe? You think you're up for something like that?
Do I have to take the role if I pass?
It would be a promotion, so I don't know why you
wouldn't. Yeah, this will be my first interview on this side of the table in about 9 years.
When you say on this side of the table, what does that mean?
Meaning I'm the interviewee rather than the interviewer.
Oh. Now, you didn't hire me, did you?
No, you weren't important enough for me to interview at the time. So
probably still not. All right. So let's get started. All right. Matt Jaffe, nice to meet you. Welcome. Do you have any questions about the role or the company? Anything I can answer before we get started?
Sorry, which company was this?
FeatureBase.
No, I'm good.
Sure. So I'll definitely try to save some time for you at the end. Why FeatureBase? Why now?
Wow, this is really hard for me to answer. All right, I'm just going to make some stuff up. FeatureBase. I was looking at you all online. You're doing cool stuff with data, and you're a startup that's about the size of the company that I've enjoyed working for in the past. So I like hard problems, and I like working with smart, dedicated people, which is why I seek out startups. So it just looked like a place that might be a good fit for me. So I wanted to check it out.
Awesome. Well, why now?
Why now? Well, I lost my last job due to a tragic accident involving some of the middle managers. So I had to move on.
Duly noted. Tell me about a professional accomplishment that you are most proud of.
Ooh, okay. Let's see. Professional accomplishment that I am most proud of. Um, so as I mentioned, I've worked at startups a lot previously, and sometimes that has involved um, trying to sort of fix things under pressure. And I can think of a few times where we've had a customer who's very engaged with us. They're using our product, and something goes wrong the night before a big demo that they're going to do to um, you know their senior people. Um, and we hop on and we work the issue and debug things until it's fixed. And we've had that happen, where we turn something around, um, in the middle of the night, before their big demo, and kind of save the account. And I think that ability to sort of just stay cool and work the problem is something I'm very proud of.
Can you share some specifics of that? Is there any like detail, like a specific situation and kind of what went well and what didn't go well?
Yeah. So the I don't know if I can mention the actual customer meeting. So there was a particular customer who was really definitely our most biggest brand name customer, and um, that, like I said, they were getting ready to do a demo the next day, and this was several years ago. So what went wrong was it was a performance issue. Some query was not performing as expected. So we got on the phone with the customer. Their management is on the phone part of the time, kind of checking in and out, and we start working the problem, which involved like, okay, like demonstrate the problem for us. Okay, let's run a profile while that's happening. Send the profile over. Okay, we check it out. We make some code changes. We build a new binary. We send that over. They go through their deployment process. Um, they run it. There's still an issue happening. We take another profile. Now it's actually a different issue. It's moved to a different place, and we kind of go through that flow of look at performance profiles, make code change, roll out a new build, customer deploys it, and we just keep iterating on that until we completely fix the problem.
So it sounds like you're most proud of, with the pressures on in the moment, being there for your customer, working in service to them and their problems, and then being able to deliver in that situation.
Yeah, it's not an ideal place to be, and I definitely recognize this. You don't want to be constantly fighting fires, but when you're working at a startup, I think the nature of things is there's never enough time to get everything exactly the way you want it and to do all the testing you want to do. And sometimes you have to take risks to get your product off the ground, and sometimes that results in, okay, this thing needs to be fixed right now for this customer, or it's going to be terrible for the company. And if you can stay calm in those situations and just kind of buckle down and work the problem, I think that's very beneficial. And then after the fact, of course, you want to kind of take it back and look at how did we get here? Are there parts of our process that we can change that can avoid this kind of thing happening in the future? Are there, obviously we want to remedy the specific things that led to this, but can we sort of step up a level and remedy the meta things that sort of led to this happening in the first place? Can we solve the problem in the general class of problem rather than the specific problem?
I think it's an excellent example. What I take away most from it is I think a lot of junior engineers, when they think about writing software, it's this experiment that's in a lab, right? And that's not the reality of software. Software is to be used by customers and hopefully to be sold. And that's, your experience as a software engineer. It's not just about writing code. It's about, the code living and breathing in another area, and the customer has paid you good money for it. You work in service to ensuring that the software is working on their behalf. So I think it's a fantastic example.
Yeah, I very much believe in a developer should be involved in as much of the life cycle as possible, from writing the code to operating it to supporting it. I think in the end of the day that produces better results than, if you're throwing it over the wall to an ops team or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Uh, tell me about your greatest failure.
Greatest failure. Um, so I don't know if I have a specific instance of something really catastrophic. But I'm definitely very bad at estimates. And I'm pretty bad at like staying um, staying organized when there's lots of different tasks. I'll jump around a little bit. So I think, this is my greatest failure. I got it. So for a couple years, I stepped into a management role. I was director of engineering and then VP of engineering. And I don't think I did a very good job as a manager. Not for lack of trying. I tried to instill good software engineering process, and um, I made it a point to sort of step back from being in the code day to day and actually focus on learning how to be a good manager. But I think it was a challenging environment, and it was a lot for me to learn at once, and it's just really not the kind of thing that I'm naturally good at. I mean, I have having challenging conversations with people, is very exhausting for me, kind of like emotionally exhausting. And I don't think I was able to sort of, have enough of those and make the right decisions about when not to have those conversations, like when it's just not worth it. And actually, I ended up hiring someone to sort of, be my boss and take my place. And that has worked out really well. And I feel like I've actually learned a lot from him. And if I had to take on that role in the future, I'd be a lot more confident. But definitely prefer to be in the technical role, writing code and architecting things and making software work.
That's a really interesting example. I would probably make the case of an accomplishment for that. I think that, you know,
Well, isn't that just
identify
good interview technique, right? When you're asked
I
about
think
your
that
greatest failure, you,
think of that identifying, you identified, where you were a good fit and you acknowledged it, and you made a change. I don't think everybody has that trait. But let's dive into that a little bit. Let's say you could go back in time, right? You can go back in time. Let's bring back to where kind of you were offered the role of director and or VP, or you kind of started that. Would you do anything different? Would you make any changes, knowing everything you know today?
yes. There's a lot of things that I would do differently. Knowing what I know, like if I had all the experience that I have today, when I initially took on that role, the team was pretty small. I knew everyone really well. I think I would probably still do it. Maybe I'd be, keeping an eye out for folks who, I might think might make good managers to hire. Because I mean, at the time, I had never hired a software manager. Like, I didn't really know what that would look like. So it was almost like the path of least resistance was kind of just to take on the role, because we didn't have a software manager at the time. We just had a bunch of developers and like our CEO. Um, so now there's lots of things I would do differently, but they're little micro things. It's like um, just decisions about what to spend your time on, what to focus on, what to give attention to, and what to say like, nah, it's not going to matter. Um, and I think having some amount of process in your software engineering is really important, but it's also really important not to get overly wedded to it. And I think when people are first starting out, like, oh, we're gonna do agile or something like that, they get really married to a lot of the details and they try to get them just right. And I think that's very counterproductive. It hurts morale, and um, it's not the right thing to focus on.
Yeah, is it fair to say that that was a necessary journey to help you get where you're at today?
Yeah, I tend to believe that the best software engineers will have done a tour of duty through management, just because it builds so much empathy, right? You meet a lot of people who are like, management, blah, doesn't matter. But it's a very, if you've ever had a manager who's very good, you can see what a positive impact they can have, and what an important role it is. Um, so I was going to make a joke there. I didn't have the heart. Um, so, so yeah, I think it's really the biggest thing. I think is it builds empathy. So a software engineer who is doing an individual contributor who has done management in the past, I think is on balance going to be a more valuable member of the organization than not than someone who hasn't.
Thank you for that. So I'm not very technical, but I'm going to try to ask a couple technical questions here. So we are a Go shop. You may not know Go or not, but on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a beginner and 5 being an expert, how would you rank your Go expertise?
Probably about a 4. I've used it extensively for the last 8, 6, 7 years of my career. Um, I didn't write the language, so I would never, I would never call myself, I'd give myself the highest score in a language that I hadn't actually like been involved in developing. But uh, I'm it's definitely a language I know very well and kind of know the pitfalls of, and am very comfortable, tuning performance or getting into the nitty gritty of.
So I'm just going to ask a couple basic questions here. So does the Go language have booleans, and if it does, how are they defined?
Yeah, it has booleans. You say like a colon equals true if you want to assign the value true to a, or a colon equals false.
How do you define that variable or that type?
Oh, bool, bool.
Cool. Next question: how is memory allocated and managed in Go?
So Go is a garbage collected language, so it has a runtime that manages your memory for you, um, on the heap. Go is actually, it's a pretty interesting language in that one of its big sort of marquee things is Go routines, right? Like really good support for concurrency. Every Go routine has its own stack, which can actually grow dynamically, which is pretty unusual for most languages. So a lot of Go performance tuning comes down to trying to get more stuff allocated on the stack rather than on the heap, so that it's not exposed to the garbage collector. Because what happens is Go's garbage collector is very good. It doesn't have super long pauses, or anything like that. Like old bad old days of Java, where the GC would just take down your whole app for like 10 seconds or something. Go doesn't do that, but every time the garbage collector runs is it's just general. It's bad for several reasons. It 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 takes up CPU resources, but it also thrashes your cache. So the CPU cache, it's doing stuff on the CPU. So it's pushing other things out of cache, which hurts the performance of your whole application. So the more stuff you can get off the heap and stuff that the GC doesn't have to look at, the better off you typically are in Go.
And how, what type of, I mean, how would you manage memory? What would be, what type of method or function would you use to do it?
I mean, it's all about the three R's, Jason. It's reduce, reuse, and recycle. So if you can not allocate memory in the first place, that's the best one. That's reduce. If you can, reusing the same structures and not having them sort of go out of scope and have to be garbage collected is kind of the next best thing. And then the last resort is recycling, which is essentially what the garbage collector does. It frees the memory so it can be used again in the future.
Cool. 3 reserved words. Tell me kind of what they are and when's a good time to use them. The 3 reserved words are defer, panic, and recover.
Right. So defer is a cool thing that Go does where you can say, run this function. So you say defer and you give it a function. You invoke a function after that. And it says, what it's saying is, run this function at the end of the current function, the current scope. So when the current function that we're in returns, you're going to run this. And if you defer multiple things, they all go on a stack and they come off in the opposite order. And so what that allows you to do is no matter what point that function exits, if you have some crazy control flow and it's like returning in all kinds of different places, no matter what point it exits, you can run some cleanup routine or some like logging routine or something that you want to run no matter what. So you see a lot of like at the beginning of a function, I'm going to lock a mutex and then I'm immediately going to defer unlock so that I know that mutex will be unlocked when no matter how this function exits. Even if the program panics, that will still get run. So that's really, really useful. And not many languages do that, if any other than Go. So panic, you said panic and recover, right?
Correct.
So panic is literally just invoke a panic. So execution stops, any deferred stuff gets run, and the program stops, and the stack traces of all the Go routines get printed to the console. And the only exception to that would be if a calling function issued a recover, which essentially can catch a panic and allow you to execute whatever logic you want at that point. You could panic again. You could resume going or whatever. You mostly don't want to use panic and recover. It's considered not idiomatic to make that kind of like part of your API, right? Like I really only use panic in situations where it's like, this should be impossible, but I want to catch this in case there's a logic error somewhere in the code. And then, you panic and things blow up. And then the main place that recover is used, that you see in Go a lot, is in the standard library, in the HTTP package. If in the handling of an HTTP request, a panic happens, there's a sort of a global recover that catches those, and it'll print out the panic, but not actually crash your server.
Cool. Thank you for that. Last question. Let's see. So compare and contrast 2 ways to share information with Go routines. One using synchronized shared memory and the other using channels.
Yeah, so synchronized shared memory would be like you pass a pointer to a struct or something into multiple different Go routines, and you protect that with a mutex, right? So each Go routine will acquire. You probably do like an RW mutex, so it has read and write. If you just wanted to look at what's in there, you acquire the read lock, and if you want to modify it, you have to acquire the write lock. Or you could just do a regular mutex and you just lock it every time, but then you don't get multiple readers able to access it concurrently, which is usually a nice property for performance. Um, so that's one way. That's a lot of languages have stuff like that. It's pretty low level. Channels are sort of Go's marquee, communication primitive, and Go is sort of built around this idea of communicating sequential processes, which was a paper that came out forever ago about programming language design. And basically the idea is that you want to have sort of explicit communication between your different processes, and in Go you can do that over channels, and a channel is basically a FIFO, right? You put some first in, first out. So it's like a little queue, like a little buffer of messages. So one channel can write to the queue, and another channel can read from the queue. And you can set up the channel such that that has to happen synchronously, meaning that the one that's writing can't continue past that point until another one reads it, or asynchronously, where the channel is buffered and one Go routine can write into the channel and then continue on its merry way. And another Go routine can kind of pick up the message at another time. So under the hood, channels are implemented with locks, with mutexes. So it's just kind of a the big thing that channels give you that you don't get with mutexes is a feature of the language where you can do a select on a channel. So you can do sort of a select will allow you to have like multiple cases where different cases might be reading from different channels, or one might just be like a timeout. And you can have sort of you can say like, I want to do something if there's something in any of these channels, but if there's not immediately something in any of those channels, I can have a default case where I just continue on. So that's a really powerful piece of functionality that's pretty difficult to build with just mutexes. So if you need that kind of thing, going with channels is good. If you're really worried about performance, you usually don't want to use too many channels, and you can usually get better performance going with mutexes, but it tends to make your code more spaghetti-ish, and more prone to race conditions and other types of concurrency bugs.
Awesome. Typically, I'd ask greatest strength and weaknesses, but I think you talked about that a little bit. You talked about kind of the areas that you're good in and maybe are not the best areas. So I'll skip that one. But I would like to talk about Agile software development lifecycle. I mean, everybody puts that on their resumes, but I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of what everyone calls today the Agile software development lifecycle versus the waterfall software development lifecycle. What are the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, I don't actually have a lot of experience with waterfall. I've mostly worked at small companies and startups, but I think the downfall of waterfall is that it's BDUF, big design up front, right? You're trying to sort of figure out everything before you start, and I just don't think that's a very good way to develop software, because in most cases you don't know exactly what you want, and you learn a lot along the way, and you want to be able to course correct. Almost every software development project takes this flow. There's very rare cases where you can write up a spec at the very beginning that says exactly what you want, and that's not going to change. And so, waterfall with like a very rigid schedule just tends to get blown up very quickly, and you end up wasting a lot of planning time. And so Agile, and obviously there are tons of different flavors of Agile and ways to do it and so on and so forth, and you can debate all this stuff for days. But the basic idea with Agile is plan just enough to kind of get you to the next milestone, and just enough to sort of give the business visibility, into what the plan is, where we're going, but not so much that you're bogged down with the minutia of it, and not so much that you've wasted a bunch of time and have on things that you'll end up having to replan. So, oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was just one more point is that your immediate future should have a pretty clear, detailed plan, and as you get further out, it should get um, sort of more vague and broad and less detailed.
So what would you say would be the cons of Agile? It sounds like Agile is perfect.
Uh, well, it, as I mentioned, it has a lot of different. There's a lot of different practitioners out there that have a lot of different opinions as to how to go about it. Um, I think the broad strokes description that I gave is kind of pretty much the right way to like do software projects for the most part. It might not fit every project. Like there are some projects where you really can just define everything up front, work through it, um, and that actually works. And then um, I'm recalling some stuff I read about stuff where Agile doesn't work as well, like certain situations, but that's not all coming back to me right now. Um, but the basic idea of you know plan just enough to get to your next milestone and learn from that is I think the big takeaway. And then there's a lot of there's a lot of different ways you can go about implementing that have lots of different pros and cons. And I don't think there's any perfect way to do it. And frankly, I'm not really interested in thinking about that too much or spending a lot of time on it. Basically, pick a way, and if it's not working, make a change.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you did touch on it. You said that as you go farther out in time, things get more vague. And Agile by design will let you pivot. That's its objective, is to be agile. But that doesn't always serve product owners and managers. It doesn't always serve sales, right? I mean, sales folks want to be able to set expectations with customers. But if you have a process that allows those states to change because it allows a pivot, it kind of puts them in a tough spot. So in my experience, Agile can be troublesome if you really need to hit dates. It doesn't plan for you. It's the opposite, actually. It allows you to miss dates. That's not its intent, obviously. But that is where Agile or Waterfall is good, right? There's not a lot of fixed price contracts anymore. But if you had a fixed price contract and a fixed set of requirements, then that is what you would want, because you would want to stay on track. Because if you go over, then that's going to cost your business money. But really, really good points on that.
Yeah, that's a great point actually, and something I hear a lot is coming back to me now is like if you're doing agile, you need the whole business to be on board. Like you can't just do it within your software team and expect to be super successful. You really have to get the whole business on board, and sometimes that's just not possible. Depending on the nature of your business.
Uh, Two more questions. I promise won't go too much longer. So the next is adversity. Talk to me about a conflict, a situation, a conflict that you had with a peer. So not somebody you had authority over or had authority over you. So talk to me about that conflict and how you navigated.
Sure. Let me take a second to try and think of a good example. Um, so I guess just pulling from recent history, I work closely with one of the other. These conflicts aren't very conflicty. Let me reach back a little bit further and see if there's something a little spicier. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the goal of this is to take you a little bit out of your comfort zone. Obviously, conflict is not always fun, but it does happen, and it's important that everybody, finds the right way to navigate through it, because those sorts of things do happen.
yeah, so actually, much older example from when we first kind of when our startup was kind of in its infancy. There was another developer, actually from a previous company. There was oh no, that I was in a manager role in that one. So yeah, let's go back to this one. So there's another developer who um, was writing writing software in a way that I felt was not idiomatic and was sort of making um, part of our code overly complex, um, and was pretty resistant to changing the way they were going about things. And we had a lot of kind of like long debates in like pull request comments and stuff like that, where you kind of go back and forth and citing different blog posts and articles about how the language should be used or whatever. And it was very unproductive. Um, Unfortunately, this story actually doesn't have a happy ending because it I don't know it never really resolved fully, and some of those bits of code are still in our code base today. Um, so yeah, maybe not the greatest example for an interview, but
Actually, I think that's kind of a decent example, right? So, and it's in what you didn't say. So clearly, you've talked about some subjective differences because you're both quoting blog posts, and my words, right? Style differences. But what you didn't do is you didn't make it something it wasn't, right? You didn't make it anything more than a difference of opinion, and that's kind of reasonable, right? Because there was a conflict and you didn't escalate it. You didn't make it a horrible situation. You talked through it the best you could, but ultimately it was not something that could reasonably be resolved without forcing someone to pick sides. Is that accurate?
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty conflict averse, and at the time we didn't really have a manager, so it wasn't something that we could just say like, all right, so, like we need somebody else to make a decision on this or something like that. So the I think the structure of the organization wasn't really helping us out there. Um, but stuff like that, I mean, you don't want to spend nearly as much time as we spent on it. And you really do just kind of want someone to make a decision so that you can have consistency, which tends to be the most important thing. So I think having a clear organizational structure where there's a clear path to get that kind of thing resolved is important, and just recognizing when it's not worth the time and just finding someone to resolve it is probably the right way to go about that.
It's a really good point. I like to call that healthy escalation. I mean, there will always be situations where sometimes you need somebody to step in because it's just for the betterment of progress, right? And to your point about consistency, since no arbiter decided that, then it kind of stayed that way. Um, but let's go ahead and just kind of walk through the second part of it, which is same thing I asked earlier, right? So knowing everything you know today, even today, go back in time to where those conversations started happening with that developer and kind of the differences of opinion. Would you do anything different? And if so, what?
Yeah, I mean, I think I basically just cut it off earlier and look to try to define enough organizational structure such that there's a way to resolve that properly. Like that you don't need to debate in circles, forever and ever. You got to recognize like, okay, there's probably not like a clear right answer here, and we need to make a decision that we're all going to kind of commit to and stick with, and have a process, define the process for making those types of decisions, and then follow it.
Cool. So last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Where do I see myself in 5 years? Doing some traveling, definitely retired. I mean, obviously. Um, no, in all seriousness, um, I'm part of the reason I like to do the startup thing is because it has the potential, it has that really really high ceiling, of potential, and I find that very exciting. So if but at the same time, I like I like the work I'm doing. And so, if in 5 years I'm, grinding away on a cool database and, building the company, that's fine with me. If I'm, um, a multimillionaire, that's also fine with me. Um, and as long as I'm, kind of growing, learning things, becoming a better developer, and and have a reasonable work life balance. I'm not at a point in my career where I'm like chasing the next promotion or trying to get a new title or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any questions for me? Anything I can answer before we wrap up?
Um, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
So that's a good question. I really liked your answer about in all seriousness, I really liked your answer about traveling. So what that signals is that you're motivated to grow quickly and to try to do great things. Hence, working at a startup, you want those things. It's not about coasting or anything like that. In 5 years, um, I guess I also liked your answer about kind of understanding who you are. I think for me in my career, I think I'm still learning and still growing. So I want to see who I can be. I haven't seen that end yet. So I still want to. I haven't gotten. I don't want this to come out the wrong way. I don't want it to sound like you took a step back. I want to make it sound like I haven't gotten to that place yet where I've seen that I'm not that's not a good fit for me. So I actually kind of want to get to that place. I want to get to a place where it's like, yeah. I want to know who I am. So I'm still feel like I want to step up, if that makes sense. But ultimately, I hope I can have the same level of humility that you have had, if that's the right word, and understanding and accepting, the right fit for you.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, I think 42 minutes is probably a pretty good place to end it.
All
It's a
right.
very special
So
number.
so first of all, a little bit of full disclosure. I opened with getting asked technical questions on initial interview. I took some liberty. That was a setup, and oh my gosh. So I purposefully went and searched for the hardest Go questions I could find. I mean, I opened with the bull one, right? But honestly, I was trying to trip you up. And in all seriousness, I hate to say it, but I came out of it super impressed. Now, I don't know if your answers were correct. The interwebs they'll be judging you, but you usually when people fib or exaggerate, they definitely don't go that deep and they don't get all those things wrong. They may try to fib a couple quick little answers, but they're not going to talk at length. So I'm betting highly on your answers. So I took some liberty there, and you knocked it out of the park. Thank you for that. Uh,
I can give you some harder questions because
oh, they weren't that
those,
hard. Oh,
those
sorry.
were kind of softballs.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Uh, yeah, and I really like.
Jason, next time ask Siebes for hard Go questions.
Okay.
Then
I
you might have tripped me up.
I liked your 5 year answer. I That kind of caught me off guard. I was like, wow, that's kind of a cool answer. I'd not ever heard anyone say that before. And of course, you want to judge somebody. You want to say, oh wow, you think you're gonna be retired? Like, yeah, who wouldn't want to be retired? Who wouldn't want to be done in 5 years, whatever age you are, wherever you're at in your career, unless you're 3 years away from retirement. But I really like that answer too. So that was good. It brought me back to. I had an employee once. I do one-on-ones a lot, obviously, and one day this employee came to me and said, you know what, I don't want to do software anymore. I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? You want to do DevOps, you want to do sales. He's like, I want to teach people to sail boats, and I'm like, okay. And I won't bore this podcast with that, but you never know what questions you're going to get when you ask that. But I think the worst thing that you can do is keep somebody in a role that they don't want to be in. So I think it's important to kind of ask those questions on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's good to ask yourself those questions on a regular basis because sometimes you'll be like you'll realize things as you're answering them like, oh, that's interesting. um, yeah, this was great. No, I appreciated the interview.
All right, that's what I have. I hate to say it, that was probably one of the best technical answers and interviews I've gotten. I would have loved to have gotten to the end of this podcast and been able to criticize you, but I can't. I wish I could. Well done.
Well, thank you. I thought that was a pretty good interview. I give you a B plus.
Pretty good. I'm not here to be pretty good. Okay, I'm here to be great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Feel free to comment on Jeffy's lack of understanding of Go. We look forward to your comments.
All right. Take it easy, everybody.